If your first inclination is to hide in the face of criticism, then show up twice as much, right? So it's doing the opposite thing that you really want to do. It's just like that thing that you think is keeping you safe. That's where the breakthrough lies. Some of my biggest seasons of growth came on the other side of facing the thing that I was most afraid to face. Today, we're going to talk about how do you actually identify what your biggest blocks are around success, around the things you want to achieve in your business, and then how do you overcome them? This was another theme that came up recently when I polled our text community about just what is showing up around their life and their business that they really want to break through this year. And I was a little bit surprised. There were a few people who said, hey, actually, I need some help identifying what my biggest blocks actually are. So we're going to dive into this because there are some effective ways to figure out what your blocks are. And then the way I think about blocks, or what's in our way, if we think about a block as just anything that's standing between us and achieving the result that we want, there are fruits and then there's roots. We're going to talk about this in the first question. So I'm going to dive in there. Chris Harline asked, what are some exercises someone can do to find their limiting beliefs in their business? I recently heard that what you think are your mental blocks aren't really your true limiting beliefs because they're generally hidden in your subconscious and you need to work to discover them. Okay, I love this question because that is true to an extent that the deeper root of the thing that's blocking you is a little bit more subconscious. It actually is something that feels like a threat to your current identity for you to even know that it exists. And I think it's important to start there because to understand how our blocks and our limiting beliefs or behaviors really function is that these are beliefs that think and believe they're protecting us. They think they're protecting our physical safety. Now, the thing they're actually protecting is our identity and the part of us that has no interest in growing. So there is an actual part of your brain that's wired for survival that if you think about the way that the brain functions, there's a part of our brain that is in charge of our heart rate, our breathing, keeping blood pumping through our veins. Things that if we had to stop and think about them in order to keep being alive, we would probably be dead in a millisecond. We don't even have to think about that. The brain handles it. But there's things that in that part of the brain feel like an actual threat to survival because they are. So if you hold your breath for too long, if your heart stops pumping, those are actual threats to your survival. So any change in that area feels like it sets off this alarm bell that this is like stranger danger. Do not pass go. And what happens in the mind is that it can start to carry over into things that aren't actually a threat. So where if anything were to change with our heart rate, our breathing, we would actually die. The brain can sometimes collapse changes in other areas, changes that are actually positive, as a threat to your survival. So it's why when it comes to uncovering these really deep-rooted blocks that are keeping us at our current identity, our current level of happiness, success, our current relationships, the brain can start to make up that if that changes, you might die. So it'll hide those things kind of in the subconscious and try to keep you from discovering them. It's like an Easter egg hunt. But the truth is that there are fruits to that root. So what I mean by that is there are ways that those subconscious blocks show up on the surface, which can send us on this little Easter egg hunt to eventually find the deeper root. And I actually think that is the most effective way to confront limiting beliefs. I think that the deeper root of it is hidden in the subconscious for a reason. It is to protect us. And It might be too much for our nervous system. It might send us into a panic if we were to uncover it and try to completely remove it overnight. So the fact that, we can kind of go on this Easter egg hunt, if you will, I'll keep using that analogy, to uncover first the fruit. So how does that programming show up in your life? Where are you conscious of things that are blocking you? And address that first, then go deeper. So here's an example of this. So in my journey, I knew that I was pretty sensitive to criticism. I knew that I felt really controlled by what other people thought of me. It was a lot of what kept me small and kept me safe and playing safe until I decided to do something different and to risk disappointing or upsetting people, to risk criticism. So at the fruit level, what I could see, the part that I was aware of is, wow, I really don't like the thought of putting out, when I think about my cute little blog I used to have that I never shared with anyone because I was so afraid of someone criticizing it. The reason I didn't share it, like every time I would publish an article and think about sharing it online, like promoting it, I physically felt unwell. It was such a limiting belief that having people not approve or getting criticism felt so uncomfortable. It kept me from putting myself out there. And I was aware of that. I knew that I was putting a lot of weight on the opinions of other people. As I've gone forward, and it really wasn't until I started to take actions that were contrary to my default mode, which was to not show up, to not put myself out there, to not risk being criticized. The more I started to lean into that and realize that, I can break through this fear, the more I've been able to access the deeper layers of it. And so now, let's just say 7 years later, from when I really had a huge breakthrough around that pattern, now I can actually see, because I've done deeper work, I've done therapy, I've done, so many different things that have allowed me to access the deeper layers of this, because it doesn't seem as much of a threat to my overall survival anymore. I had to get through that layer, the fruit layer, where I could see it on the surface, to access the deeper roots, where now I can see, I can kind of see where that got programmed into me in childhood. I can see where having someone upset with me because I grew up in a home where we were just very walking on eggshells because of one member of the family, and it felt very unsafe to have someone upset. I really internalized this pattern of needing to kind of just keep everyone around me happy, which, if you're going to do something big in the world, is impossible. You cannot keep that pattern and show up fully as you're meant to show up in the world. But I wouldn't have been ready to see those deeper layers and access those deeper layers and start to reprogram that when I first became aware. Like, to go from unaware of this pattern and how it was having an impact on my journey to getting like that deep into it would have been too much. So it's true. Your limiting beliefs won't reveal themselves in full in terms of like the deeper root of what's really going on, which is where you create real and lasting change. But the access point is most of us do know what our fears, our limiting beliefs, the things holding us back are. And if you're not sure, the fastest way to find out is to apply pressure to your goals. You can do this in a couple of different ways. Either shorten the time frame that you're giving yourself to accomplish something, make the goal itself bigger, or think about what it would look like for you to like 10x the way that you're attacking this goal. So let's say you're posting on social media every day. Now you're going to post on social media 10 times a day. Like, just take it to such an extreme level of like, okay, if I were showing up at this level, and then notice what fears, insecurities, reasons, beliefs show up. We do this within our 6-figure school, which is our 12-week business mentorship. We start the program. The first 30 days is a challenge. We call it the Surprise Yourself Challenge. And it's all about taking a goal that you thought would take you the full 12 weeks or longer to accomplish, and just asking yourself, how could I get this done in 1 month, in 30 days? And who would I have to become? How would I have to show up in order to do that? So what a lot of people find is that, okay, they have to confront their perfectionism. Like they would have taken 12 weeks because they wanted it to be perfect. But if they really just committed to getting that podcast out, to, submitting their first book proposal, to get a book deal, to, whatever that might be, if they put out the least perfect version of it, they could get it done in 30 days or less. And what it does, that challenge is designed to bring everyone, if they choose to participate, to the point where their stuff, the stuff that blocks them, is forced to come to the surface, because now you have a chance to do something different. In the face of what was stopping you all along, you have the chance to do something different. So how can you apply that kind of pressure to your goals and to the things that you want to accomplish in an effort to bring your limiting beliefs to the surface? That's the whole goal. It doesn't even matter if you accomplish the thing you set out to do or if you do it within the time frame you wanted. The entire goal of putting pressure around that thing you want to achieve is to bring your limitations to the surface so that you can start to transform them. And then knowing that you're going to see the fruit, the thing on the surface that shows up, it's kind of like every time I say fruit, I'm like, that makes it sound good, but it's like rotten fruit. So it's like the fruit you don't want. But even for rotten fruit, there's things below the surface. There are deeper roots that you don't have to see completely in order to start to transform that. The way you transform it is you address it at the fruit level, the rotten fruit level, and then you start to dig deeper as you feel ready to address the deeper roots. The next question is from Marissa Riley, who asked, how do I expand without feeling judged or embarrassed of what others think? And I know so many of you listening right now can feel this on a deep level. Any of us who have this tendency to put a lot of weight on what other people think will be presented with the opportunity to overcome it, usually in the form of facing that exact fear. And this is the good news, but also the maybe not so good news if you're hearing this and thinking, I thought I could just get over that and then start putting myself out there online and never get criticized. No, I promise you, if this is an area of sensitivity for you, you will be granted the opportunity to overcome it by facing it. And that's actually the most effective way to work through it. So you can either wait forever until that opportunity shows up and you start to, get to face that judgment or criticism, or you can lean into it and break through it faster by embracing the discomfort that it brings. So the things that we fear the most are often the exact area that our biggest breakthrough lies in. So if the fear of what other people are going to think of you, or are they going to make fun of me? Are they going to laugh at my failures? Are they going to think, who does she think she is? As all of that comes to the surface, I want you to remember what I was saying just a minute ago. Number one, realize that it's there as a protective mechanism. It feels very unsafe to our current identity to risk judgment and failure. It feels really unsafe to risk embarrassment, but it's not actually a threat to your physical safety. Like, you would live if someone judged you. You would live if someone just wasn't on board with your expansion and decided they didn't want to be friends with you anymore. No, it would hurt. It would be very painful, but you would live, you would survive. And if you want to actually break through this, like I was saying, the way to do that is to face it directly. And you can do this in a couple of different ways. You may be gifted, and I really do mean the truest intention of the word gifted. You might be gifted with the opportunity to confront it directly. And it's not going to feel like a gift in the moment, but I want you to remember, I want you to come back to this moment and hear my voice reminding you that it is actually a great gift, because the moment that you have an opportunity to confront being disliked, being judged, being made fun of, is the moment that you have the opportunity to create a breakthrough. So if that happens, then I want you to, in that moment, if you can, you might kind of freak out at first or you might have a reaction, but I'm going to come back to a centered and grounded place and realize that it's showing up because your breakthrough lies within confronting that exact scenario. That was actually what ended up happening for me. Is I had the opportunity to sit with someone, to sit with the energy of someone who was vastly misjudging me, who was misunderstanding me and going on an entire rampage to other people about how I wasn't who I said I was, like all these very hurtful things. And I remember sitting in tears, just really so hurt, so sad. It was just so painful. And in that moment, I realized, wow, I give so much power to what other people think of me. Like I was ruined for a good 6 months over one person completely misunderstanding me. Like not even someone who knew me well, because if they knew me well, they would know that the things that they were saying weren't true. And to this day, that person is my greatest teacher. They are my greatest gift, because in that moment that I had the opportunity to face that and not do the thing that my ego really wanted to do, which was to defend myself, to try and change their mind, to go around and make sure other people weren't buying into what they were saying. I just allowed myself to sit in the discomfort. And then I kept reinforcing to myself what I knew the truth was, the truth I knew about myself, not these misunderstandings. And in that moment, having the opportunity to confront the thing I thought I was most afraid of, and then choosing to do the least comfortable thing. And this is also critical to the breakthrough, to not defend yourself, to not give in to the immediate reaction that your brain wants you to take. That's where these fears start to loosen their grip. So if you can remember that, whether your fear, just like Marissa's, is in being judged or feeling embarrassed, based on what other people think of you, then just know that your biggest breakthrough lies in confronting that. So you could either wait for the opportunity to arrive, or the other way to move through it is just sit and visualize. What would it feel like? Allow the feelings to come up in you of what it would feel like to be judged. Like imagine every single person on the internet, like the entire internet, the entire world, writing something hateful about you. Like just imagine the most extreme circumstance of it, because we know that's not likely to happen. And just sit with whatever it brings up in you and notice what your mind wants you to do next. Either hide, pull back and stop sharing, or defend yourself, or feeling the need to kind of go into this energy of like it almost feels like this very anxious energy of like, make it go away. Instead of just sitting in the discomfort and doing the opposite, so like if your first inclination is to hide in the face of criticism, then show up twice as much, right? So it's doing the opposite thing that you really want to do. It's just like that thing that you think is keeping you safe. That's where the breakthrough lies. And you don't have to actually confront the scenario in order to create the breakthrough. You can visualize it. But if you're gifted the opportunity to face it, just know that there is something so beautiful. There really is a gift for you inside that experience. And some of my biggest seasons of growth came on the other side of facing the thing that I was most afraid to face. So just remember that the things that feel the most uncomfortable are actually pointing us to our biggest opportunity for growth, if you choose to see it that way. So the last question was from Marie, and Marie is someone who I get to work with in our 6-Figure School program as well. And we've had so many amazing conversations inside that program about her starting her medical practice. She is a medical provider and, is like leaving the safety and security and prestige of her current role to start something of her own. And I just felt all the feels in her question. And I know so many of you probably feel it too, but she also shared how she's not really sure what her biggest block is, but there's a lot of feelings coming up: her worthiness, feeling ready. She also shared that she feels afraid of people at her previous job finding out about her new business, and whether it's leaving bad reviews or laughing at her failures. And I just want to validate for any of you who are really feeling these things, like feeling like an imposter, feeling like you are so afraid of the uncertainty of, needing it to be perfect before you put something out there. I want to kind of speak to the general theme of what's going on in relation to what we shared about the roots and the fruits, the rotten fruit of these limiting beliefs and where they actually begin. Because if we can step back and understand what's actually happening when these fears and these limiting beliefs are coming up, we can start to support ourselves in moving through them. And especially for someone like my dear friend Marie, who has a lot of things showing up, it probably means that your breakthrough is equally huge. If there is this much resistance within you to making the changes that are going to come, the positive changes in other people's lives, in your life, in your identity, your view of yourself, then it means that you have equal and opposite opportunity for huge growth and expansion. And I don't know if I'm just bullshitting myself, because that's like how I've kept myself going in the midst of a year where everything seemed against me. But I do believe it. It feels so true to my core that those of us that really take on and face the deepest of challenges, that have to transform the most within ourselves in order to create the success that we desire, there's equal, if not 2, 3, 10 times the amount of blessings waiting for you on the other side. But it's going to require you to lean into that fire, into that resistance. So if you're not sure, like if you're someone like Marie who you feel like all the fears are coming up, then I would just start with, what do you see right in front of you as the next step? Because so often we can do this thing where we project every possible fear out into the future. And especially, I don't know if this feels true for Marie or not, being in the medical field, you kind of are trained to think about the worst case scenario and plan against it. Where within business, it's not a life or death situation. In another part of your life, it kind of is. So understand that the thing that actually makes you brilliant as a healthcare provider is probably not doing you any good in terms of being willing to risk failure in starting your business. So what I would do is, and we've been working, within six-figure school, so I know Marie is supported with a plan and the next steps to take, is just focus when you notice your mind kind of going to all the what ifs, to remember, okay, none of those things have actually happened. People have not judged you. People have not written bad reviews for your business. No one has laughed at you. You haven't failed. None of that has happened yet. And just notice how brilliant our minds are at trying to keep us safe. Sometimes it even helps me to kind of put my hand on my heart and maybe one on, on my belly and just tell myself, reaffirm, you're safe, you're good. No one's dying in this. I mean, in Marie's situation, maybe it is life or death, but you physically are not dying. And then focus on grounding yourself into the present moment. Okay, what's true right now? And what's my one next step forward? Because if we give all our energy away, and that really is what we're doing, we're giving away our power, we're giving away our energy to all these potential future outcomes that haven't even happened yet, then it keeps us paralyzed in the present moment. But if we come back to the present moment and we just ask, okay, what's one small step I can take in the right direction? And if that thing fails, or if someone laughs at me, or if something happens, would I be okay? Could I figure it out? And knowing Marie, I know that you fully could. And I know every one of you listening, you don't listen to a podcast about personal growth and entrepreneurship if you don't have your shit together, okay? You could figure it out. So when your mind wants to go to the worst case scenario, realize that it actually takes just as much energy to imagine the best case scenario as it does to imagine the worst case scenario. Your mind is just trained right now to look for the worst case scenario and all the what ifs. And it makes sense, right? That's actually helped you succeed in your career. It's just not helping you in wanting to step forward into this new chapter and really evolve your identity. So realize that when you're finding yourself in the worry and the what ifs, what's happening is you're using the power of your imagination in that moment. You're just using it to imagine all the worst case scenarios. And if you can use it to imagine the worst case scenario, you can just as easily use it to imagine the best case scenario. Like, allow yourself to dream about the freedom and the life you can create within your family. Imagine yourself dreaming of making the income that you want to make and working the hours you want to work and having people write you letters of thank you because you changed their life and you impacted them. You can imagine all of those things just as easily. It might take a little bit more effort, but the same brain and the same imagination that is so powerful, it can literally paralyze you into not taking action, is the same brain that can imagine the best case scenario and get you to take that next little step. I know it's not easy, but I mean, if there's been a theme in the last couple of episodes as I've been answering all of your questions, is that number one, you're not alone. You're so not alone in feeling this way. And number two, this is a part of the journey. You don't sign up for growth in any way, whether it's in a business, in your career, in your life, without facing and confronting your deepest fears and doubts and insecurities. And that's, the unfortunate news is that it can feel really uncomfortable, but I think it's more uncomfortable when we resist it. And the moment that we surrender to the fact that that's actually why we're on this earth, that's why we're here to grow and evolve and contribute what we learn back to other people, it takes a little bit of the sting out of the uncomfortable moments, the harder moments. And for me, it's just so validating to remember that I'm so not alone in feeling this way. And I really hope that you also feel that way from hearing all the questions that were submitted, from talking about some of these topics. And I mentioned this in a previous episode, but if you want to join the text community and be on the list I just send out a little mindset or business tip every single week. And then I do actually read and respond to as many of the replies as I can, but that's where I collect questions for upcoming episodes. And I love to hear, what do you want to know? What do you want us to talk about? Or what do you want me to bring a guest on and an expert to talk about a certain subject? This podcast exists for you. So however I can serve you and answer the things that are really coming up in your world, that's exactly what I want to do. So the way to join the text community is all you have to do is text me the word mentor to the number 602-536-7829. It'll automatically subscribe you to get the weekly text, and then, you can opt out at any time. But it is a really fun place to bring this podcast connection into a more personal connection and realize that you are not the only one who is struggling with the things that right now are stopping you from pursuing your dreams and making the impact that you're meant to make. So just remember, we're all in this together, and I am in the journey right along with you, experiencing every single up and down, every single uncomfortable moment. And I'm just so grateful to be on the journey with you.